Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Maxine Johnson about the 5 critical components for creating global communities of change. Maxine Johnson, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to be with you. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and I really appreciate your flexibility. We were scheduled for earlier in the week after months of preparation, right? And then I woke up earlier in the week the other day, and I just couldn't talk. I was sick, and anyways, so you were super gracious and flexible. We rescheduled and now we're having the conversation that I wanted to have a few days ago. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about the 5 critical components of creating global communities of change. I just love everything about that topic. I'm super excited to dive on into it. As we get started, I wanted to share Maxine's bio with everybody. Maxine L. Johnson is an author, co-author, certified life coach, transformation specialist, and expert speaker serving professional women who are purposed to lead. Featured in USA Today as one of the top 15 entrepreneurs to watch in 2021, Medium, Kivo Daily, Speak That Talks talk show, Total Transformational Radio, and keynote speaker for Canon Inc. in Virginia. She is an experienced HR practitioner where she has over 25 years of HR experience. She is the CEO and founder of Wife Boss Academy, home of the influential female, where she coaches professional women who are unaffiliated in their careers and help them discover they are purposed to lead. She is passionate about encouraging and inspiring women to be their best selves. And over the years, she has worked with women globally, helping them find positive change. She is known for creating the 5 critical components for creating global communities of change, which we'll be talking about today. Anything else, Maxine, that you would like to share with listeners by way of your background before we dive on into the conversation?
Yeah, well, one thing I want to share with listeners is I wear leadership hats, and one of the leadership hats. Well, let me back up. John, I'm glad you're feeling better. I should have said that first.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Have your voice. So yeah, one thing I want to share, one of the things that's been exciting for me is just I just landed I have a TEDx talk that was just premiered last week. It's called Why Heroes Need Help. So I was super excited about that, and you can find that on YouTube. So I'm really excited about that.
That's fantastic. What a wonderful way to reach people and to share your message. So congratulations on that. And yeah, let's dive on in. I'm super excited to explore this. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about some of the good work you're doing? So we're going to talk about the 5 critical components for creating global communities of change, but you do a lot of work with women. So tell us a little bit more about that first, and then we can talk more specifically about those 5 critical components.
Sure. So the work that I do with women, I think if it goes back to even before I formalized the whole coaching business, if you will. And it started with women coming to me about their whatever they need. And as an HR professional, as you know, coaching is a part of what we do. And I kept hearing the same thing over and over. Maxine, you should do this professionally. Maxine, you really helped me. Maxine, you should do this outside of what you do here. And I never thought about it because it just kind of came about. And what I did was I started to look into it a little bit further. And at the time, I had a coach who really pushed me and propelled me into the coaching world. And my coaching clients are women, and they're all the same professional women, and they're just a little confused about where they are in their careers, you know? And so they're like, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not sure what the next step is. I want to advance. I want to do a little bit more of this. How do I get over to this area? And how to transfer the skills that they have now into something else, depending on what that is. And so I have coached, I'll say probably close to 100 women over the course of not being, I'll say a certified life coach, but I'm talking about my experience as an HR professional, and it's all been the same thing. And when you have people that you coach, and I remember specifically a woman that I coached, she was a leader and she had an awesome opportunity at a for-profit company. And she was really nervous about it. And we really walked through step by step about what the things that she can contribute, because imposter syndrome comes into play. Why, I'm not sure, is this really for me? Am I taking, all of that fear, but we talked it through and she went and got the job. It was a really highly competitive role in a for-profit company, and she got the job. And so I was super excited. And when she said to me, I think she was the one, her name is Damaris, she said, you need to do this outside of, so that's how it all came about. And it's been going ever since. And so I'm really excited about helping women, and whether it's professional or whatever, but most of them have been professional women, career, not all necessarily educated with MDs or PhDs or LMNOPs, but women who are focused on their careers and wanting to advance.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and clearly a huge need here. Unfortunately, we have persistent gender inequality, pay gaps, access to senior leadership roles and board seats, and like all of that is well documented, and it's a persistent problem. And even over the last couple of years, there have been reports that suggest that we've set women's equality in the workplace back a generation. And so clearly we need lots of work in this space, in part to help women take hold and ownership over their own career and opportunities, and to bring their best positioning to those opportunities. And then, of course, also on the institutional and organizational side, to break down systems of inequality and to rebuild more equitable, more balanced, more inclusive organizations with environments of belonging. So all of that work that you're doing is tremendous. Now, as we talk about the 5 critical components for creating global communities of change, I imagine, there's a wide range of types of change that you envision that you want to see happen. And part of that might be women in the workplace, women leaders, and those sorts of things. But I imagine there's other types of social change that you might want to see. And the really cool thing about the modern workplace is that we're capable, we have more potential to be a major driver, a significant driver of social global change today, more than perhaps any time in recent history. So with that said, as kind of an introduction, why don't you walk us through those 5 critical components for creating global communities of change, and we can start to dissect that a bit.
Sure. Thank you, John. So it's really simple. It's simply see, share, care, change, and create. And when we look at that, to simplify, seeing, if you want me to go into just an overview, to create the change, sometimes we have to see ourselves in who we are, see ourselves in the skills and abilities that we have, see ourselves as far as our gifts and our talents. We have to recognize who we are. Then the next one is sharing those talents, sharing those skills. And how do we do that? Whether we share those skills and talents or we allow ourselves to have someone else share with us. Then it's caring. And so this kind of goes into the self-care thing, right? And so when I won't say self-care thing because it's huge, a part of, because we're all like pulling all over the place. but caring for yourself. And what does that look like? One of the things that I always talk about, and it's mentioned in the TEDx talk, is that you can't pour from an empty cup, nor can you pour from a dirty one. And meaning that sometimes we're still sharing, or we're still doing so much for everyone else, and our cup is empty, or even our cup is full, but it's dirty because we have resentment of all that we do. And, we're not coming from a place of compassion. We're coming from a place because I have to do it. And then it goes into change and being that change agent. And then lastly, it is all about create. What can you create? That's around legacy. So when we look at legacy, what are we leaving and what are we looking to leave behind? A lot of times we don't think about legacy. One of my former colleagues in the HR world, before they left to go on to another institution, we talked about legacy, and they never thought about it that way. The legacy that you left at an organization, what would that look like? When you leave an organization, what have you done to change that? What has been highlighted? So that's an overview of the 5 components to create global change.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in my mind, it starts with some individual self-awareness of where we're at. You said C was the first one. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I need to really recognize my positionality in the world and in relation to these, difficult, challenging issues, whether it be gender issues in the workplace or race, types of issues, social, political, geopolitical, economic, whatever. Like there's all these different things, right? Environmental challenges. We need to see ourselves. We need to see our positionality in relation to these challenges and these issues before we can really start the process of doing anything impactful, right?
I think that's important. And that is a place where we have to be vulnerable and just be honest with ourselves as to what that looks like. So even if we look at the racial issues that we had in our country, and to be able to really sit and reflect, what does that mean to me? And to have that conversation with myself. Or as we're coming up on what's happening with Roe versus Wade as a woman, what does that really feel? What does that mean to me? And what impact? And just be honest with ourselves, to shrug it off and say, well, it doesn't really bother me because, I'm a woman, I'm not of childbearing years, but what does that really mean? And so you have to think about and acknowledge your feelings and walk through that. And all of that helps when you get that out for yourself, whether you journal, whether you talk to someone else. It helps you really acknowledge it, because what I find and what I found is that when we don't do that, we get into a situation and it causes triggers, and then there's this different impact or outcome that we didn't have because you never really expressed it or was honest with yourself. So I think it's an opportunity for us to really look in the mirror and say to ourselves, what am I really feeling? Acknowledging those feelings and just taking action on what those feelings, so you don't have to stay in that.
Check out my new book, The Future Leader, Creating and Transforming Next-Gen Organizations. Stemming from 2 decades of professional experience and over 600 in-depth interviews with executives, thought leaders, and scholars from across the globe, The Future Leader will help you explore the ordinary, everyday actions that will help you to prepare to lead in the future of work, to respond to an uncertain future, and to produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy, courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital. exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.
So we start there, and that's just the place to start. If self-reflection is hugely important. But again, if we don't get past it, though, that's great, self-awareness, wonderful. But then what do we do with it? And are we actually going to drive any sort of meaningful change? And so your second point, was it speak? Share. So the second point, then we have to go beyond just that self-reflection. We then need to move into sharing, have those conversations, often very challenging, difficult conversations with those around us. Oftentimes there's a reason why there's these huge pressing social challenges in the world. It's because they're not simple, they're complex, and people have varying views, passionate views. So you bring up the Roe v. Wade situation and the leaked opinion from the Supreme Court that just came out a couple of days ago.
Right.
And talk about an issue that's polarized that people feel very strongly about on either side. So if you want to have any chance of driving meaningful change, you need to know where you stand and why. And then you need to be able to be willing to have those hard conversations with people and to share to see, you might change some people's minds, you might not change their minds, but at least you can have civil dialogue, come to the conversation to a place where you can have genuine mutual respect for each other. That would be a huge improvement on what we see in the current political dialogue in the US today, right?
Absolutely, because when we can bring things on the table and we can come to the agreement, and initially I'm not trying to change your mind, and I don't need you to try to change my mind, but at least if you understand where I'm coming from, that's all I ask. And I'll give you an example. Some years ago, early on in my HR career, there was a conflict between, and this is all around culture. This is around culture, right? And there was a conflict between a experienced nurse who is Caucasian and a nurse's aide who was African American. And the conflict between the two, the nurse's aide felt that the nurse was disrespectful. The nurse felt that the disrespectful and also alleged racism. And the nurse thought that the nurse's aide was very rude, unprofessional. When we sat down, here is the context of how this all came about. Nurse's aide asked the nurse, asked a question, and the nurse says to the nurse's aide, an answer in response, and said, "What?" And the nurse's aide took offense to it. What was the lesson for everyone was, in the African American community, I know at least for me, I'm not going to speak worldwide, but for me and those that I know, if you answer or responded it was very disrespectful. It was deemed as rude. Whereas the nurse had no idea. So it was once that all came out, it was all a lesson and a learn. And they moved forward just to have that conversation, because a lot of things we don't know and because we don't talk about it. So in that example, it came from something like, I thought you were rude and making these allegations of racism. It wasn't that. It was just around cultural differences. But if they put it on the table and understood it, everything worked out fine. So I think even that example is something just as simple as that. If we do more of that, I think that will create more change.
And so we start to see this carry out. We've done the self-reflection. We've moved into sharing, having the difficult conversations. Now remind us what the third point was again.
Care. Taking care of yourself.
Then we care and we show genuine empathy towards others. We show care towards ourselves. And I think that goes hand in hand with sharing, because if you're not caring for yourself, you're not going to be able to have the sustainable energy to engage in those challenging conversations and the sharing, right? If you're not genuinely invested in those around you, you're not going to be able to have any meaningful conversation with them, because you're just talking at them instead of with them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think all of that is so vital. And then we get into change, right?
Correct.
And that's ultimately what we want, right? We want to be able to impact. We want to be able to change things that we see as important, whether that's within our homes, whether that's within our organizations, in our communities, the world as a whole. We want to see things get better over time. We want to leave the world a better place for our children. We want to leave our workplace a better place for our team members, etc. So what are some of those, as we break down the change component, what are some of the specific things we can start to do to drive that meaningful change?
Change is all around the action that we take from all of the things that we learn. So whatever those actions are, so changing meaning is implementation. So whatever the goals are that you have, or whether it's organizational goals, whether it's personal goals, that's where the implementation comes in. That's where the action takes place. So if we say to ourselves, I have all of these good things, I'm clear on what my feelings are, I'm clear on what I know, I'm clear on what I do, I'm able to share, I have great communication, I care for myself, I care for others. Now what's next? The next is implementation. And what do we do to implement? Whether that's goal setting, whether that's helping someone else, that could be mentoring someone, that could be coaching someone, and it kind of flows into the last one, create, because you're leaving that legacy, right? So I think it is whatever that action is for that individual. And this is something that I do, is what does that look like for you individually?
Let's walk through this now, maybe with an example, and we can go back to women in leadership, women in the workplace if you want, or you can choose another example. But let's walk through each of these 5 components just to illustrate how this might play out.
Sure. I'm just trying to think of so many examples, but I'll think of, I think it's better if I talk about myself, if you don't mind. So one thing about it is, for me, is a lot of times that when we're coming up, people may see something in you that you don't see in yourself. They say, oh, I see your potential. And you're like, what does that mean? What does potential mean? But when you start to really see what you have, right? And you say, there is something there. There's a feeling I have. There's something there, right? And then you have to work out what that looks like. Well, what does that mean? And a lot of times, whether it's coaches, mentors, or teachers, they kind of help you work through that, because that's where the vulnerability, whether it's your parents, to really talk that out. That's where the sharing comes in, right? And so we're talking about sharing. So I know for me, it was like, what does potential mean? I don't really understand. And so, oh, wow. I guess I am a good speaker, and I didn't believe it. Everyone told me that, and I thought the sweating, every time I gave a talk, I'm sweating so bad. I'm thinking, no, I'm not good because I'm so nervous about it. And why am I so nervous? It's just my anxiety. Do I feel comfortable behind a desk hiding? Yes, I do. I feel better. I feel great. I feel so comfortable. It's like a little kid with a nice cushy teddy bear. I feel safe. However, when I understood that was just a part of who I was, and I had to walk through that. And then after that, coming through, even when I speak or I'm doing a talk or something like that, I have to replenish. I have to fill myself back up, because you pour so much out. Right. And so you give so much, and you give it your all. I give my all, and I'm exhausted afterwards. Frankly, I'm really tired. So I may just have to create that time of care. That means give myself, an hour or so. I may not want to talk to anybody. I just want to spend time to myself to really reflect, meditate, or whatever that looked like for me. And then with a part of the change, it could be, and if I'm giving a talk, goes to, if someone wants to follow up, what does that look like for that person? What does that mean? And so the follow-up is, can we connect? Let's connect. And then I can help them create the change that they need to create and implement and take that action, whatever that looks like individually. And that's a part of the creating of the legacy. When I leave here, what's in between the dash? So the birth date, right? The birth year. And whenever that year, when I leave this earth, it's what I implement, what's in between that dash is so important to me, that people could say, wow, Maxine Johnson really not only created the 5 critical components to creating global change, but she also helped me with this. She did this, she did that. And that my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren, I don't have great-grandchildren or grandchildren, but I'm just using it as an example, can look back and reflect that I was a part of the change in the world.
I love it. I love it. Maxine, this has just been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking your time today to share with me and my listeners your 5 key critical components of creating global communities of change. It's been a real pleasure. Before I let you go today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Sure. Thank you again for having me. It was a great conversation. And I can be found at www.maxineLjohnson.com. And at the website, you can find information about the book, which it can be found on Amazon. It's called Helping a Sister. And it is the 5 critical components to creating global change, and as well as the speaking and the coaching that I do. So www.maxineLjohnson.com. And I just want to share with your listeners and just to everyone that, we are in crazy times and in turbulent times. And it seems like a lot of lemons are being thrown at us. But get some sugar, Splenda, sweetener, and let's make lemonade so that we can create global change. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Maxine can do for you. Check out her book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Bluer Than Indigo Leadership, the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.